One of the most commonly asked questions in all of philosophy and religion is, what is this all for? What is the meaning of life? Hello and welcome to Wayland's Wisdom. The question, what is the meaning of life, is a strange question. It's worded quite strangely, but I think what people generally mean is, what is this all for? What is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of existence? Um, and then we get on to questions like, what's the purpose of virtue and morality? Well, I won't go into everything in this video because otherwise it'll be a very long video and I don't know all the answers. And even my answer to that question might change in the future. But I believe that I have a very simple answer, one that transcends all religion and all philosophy that has ever been. And that is that the purpose is merely to never die. Now, I don't mean this in a transhumanist sense, because death is part of life. You can't escape death. It is the final ritual. It is what makes a life fulfilled. A story cannot have no ending, otherwise it is merely a practice in degeneration. If you have a story that lasts season after season or book after book, it becomes worse and worse as time goes on because you're having to replay things that have already been. This is why long-running shows such as House tend to get worse as time goes on. And in fact, the television series House, didn't get past the third season because I realised that every episode was the same, and that the overarching story across the episodes was quite shallow and basically the same as the previous season. And the same too for The Office. The Office obviously had some issues with writers leaving and gaining new ones, but it is still the same. The seasons went on and the episodes got worse. And the same too with the human life. The older you get, the more you live, you start to get more wrinkly, more decrepit, more uh, stiff and sickly, and you start to negatively impact the people around you more often, just from the fact that your body is failing you. Now, of course, this isn't to disparage our elders. We should have respect for them. But if our elders are artificially or are successfully artificially prolonging their life, then things start to go awry. And I think if we can artificially prolong people's lives further than what is reasonable, then things will start to go very, very poorly. But what do I mean by not dying? Well, it is a mistake for humans that we believe that life is merely, or our life is merely, what belongs to us as individuals. This is a great lie. And it's a great lie that's been told and over again, and has been expanded upon whilst it's being told over and over again for a few hundred years within the Western world. And that's that we are individuals and nothing else, that we're not connected to our family in any way, whether it's our parents or our children, and we're not connected to our friends and our neighbours. So I would say that more specifically, the purpose of life is to breed. So that then means that, just looking at that idea by itself and in bad faith, you could say, well, of course, people who cannot have children therefore have no meaning, or their lives have no meaning. But I say that's not true, and that's a bad way of looking at what I'm saying. You breed in various different ways in life. Of course, there is the main or the primary way of breeding through procreation, through creating children. But there is also just the mere way of leaving a legacy. Those who have not had children and who have left no legacy have left or have led a very meaningless life. And that sounds harsh, yes, but it is true. If when you die, you only have one person who remembers you, and after a couple of years they no longer remember you, then you've left nothing behind. You've done better than someone who has been completely forgotten even before they've died. But still, you've led a meaningless life, and you've left the world without. You've left the world probably dead before you even physically died. This is why in pre-Christian societies, the idea of reputation was so important to pagans or to non-pagan contemporaries, such as more atheistic people. But reputation was still important, and their view of reputation was not necessarily just in fame, as in having lots of people know you, being famous, you know, or being famous in their life, but mainly that they were known about or spoken of, especially in good terms, after they'd died. But some people who were so hell-bent on being famous or having some form of reputation would do bad things to ensure that they had some form of reputation. This is the difference between someone who is, say, like a Ted Bundy character and someone who is perhaps more like a Lord Nelson character. One is remembered for his bad deeds, and people still speak of him. And one is remembered for his good deeds, and people still speak of him. But there is a difference, and I think that difference is more important than the reputation, and that difference is the virtue. In today's society, we do not think about virtue as highly as we ought to. We think about virtue in the context of virtue signaling, the idea that, or the practice of pretending that you are more virtuous than you really are, or that you pretend to be a good person, or you take on the attributes of a higher status idea, and that then therefore somehow makes you more virtuous. But that's not true virtue. And true virtue isn't just being a good person or not doing bad things. If anything, just avoiding doing bad things but not actually doing good things isn't virtuous in my book. I'd say that you're still you're still being unvirtuous. And why is that? Well, virtuosity is a proactive practice. It is something that you do rather than something that you attain through avoidance. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it's the difference between not sinning and being charitable, or well, charity encompasses a whole range of things. But going out of your way to help someone or to somehow make someone's life better, even if it is an impediment to your own, or especially when it's an impediment to your own. Virtuosity is in some way sacrificial. Now, where does this link with the meaning of life? Well, if you want to be remembered so that your life has meaning, then you must do things that make you remembered, even if it is just by your family and friends. Your reputation being good amongst them and you being proactive enough in your virtue will leave you with a much more meaningful legacy than somebody who simply did nothing wrong. Now, of course, when we come to the spiritual realm, reputation is not everything how people remember you is not everything, but it does mirror what God will know of you. I believe in the past on this channel I have cited a quote that was that I came up with. That was, "When I die, what will people say of me? But more importantly, what will God know of me?" And I shall explain that briefly because it is important. Throughout your life, you should be thinking about, one, what people will say of you after you're gone. You hope that people will say good things and will remember you accurately enough because of your good things. But more importantly, when you're going into that heavenly realm and you're at the in the seat where you'll be judged, and God says about you the things that He knows about you, not necessarily what people say about you, but what God knows about you, what went on through your head, what was in your heart, what your soul was telling you to do. You see, when people talk about Lord Nelson, or people talk about some other good or great historical figure, we can only say what we know of their deeds, unless, of course, they kept a diary. But even then, a diary isn't as accurate as people think it is in terms of knowing what's in someone's own head, because it still goes through a filter. But what we can never do is say for certain where somebody's heart was. Now, we can get a good idea of where somebody's heart is. We can look at ourselves and think, well, how would I do this thing if my heart was in the right place or the wrong place? And we can look at that and judge, but not very accurately and not very surely either. We can never be too certain. But God can be certain because God knows what is going on in your head. So it's not only your external virtuosity, your virtue signaling, but also how you approach things internally as well. And you may think, well, what does that matter? If I don't believe in God, then what does it matter what goes on in my head? I could be the nastiest, most cretinous animal that's ever existed, but I've given this amount of money to charity and I help Gladys down the road and this kind of thing. And I'd say, well, that's good that you help people, but if you are truly the most decrepit and evil creature known to man, then I would doubt that you would be helping people, because you could gain far more if you were less virtuous. Now, that may seem cynical, but I think it is true. I think it's true that a very good or very easy way, very efficient way of gaining power, of gaining money, of gaining influence, or just material possessions is by being somewhat evil or being able to step on other people's toes. Now, that's not always the case. It's good to have a cleaner than clean appearance. People are much more willing to work with you if you are seen as somewhat moral, or they would be seen as moral for being associated with you. However, to gain power and to gain prestige, you must do certain things. And a very easy way to gain power and prestige is by doing evil things, or by doing less than moral things. And so when you die, if it is only you, if your consciousness still exists, then you'll look at your life and say, well, yes, I got there. I got these things. I helped these people. I've been very kind and charitable. But I was kind of a bastard. And now I've got to live with that for the rest of eternity. I've got to live knowing that I got what I got for being horrible. And I would rather live eternity if it is only me and my conscience. And I'd rather live eternity knowing that I did the things I did out of the kindness of my own heart, or out of the goodness of my own heart, or because I felt compelled by the moral part of human nature to do good things, rather than the immoral part or the selfish part of my nature, still to do good things. Because ultimately, when you do good things out of an evil or immoral or selfish um, reason, they don't quite mean the same thing spiritually or metaphysically. Now, yes, the result may still be the same for the recipient of that good deed, but the result is very different for you yourself who have done it. When you do a good act or a kind act out of the goodness of your heart, it feels a lot better than doing a good or kind act for personal gain. It feels toxifying, it feels uh, disgusting, and it feels like you've kind of slurped the bin juices of life. And I'd say it's better, really, in the end, to not feel that way. There's been a very cynical approach towards life and philosophy that I feel has been quite unhelpful to a lot of people. And that is that everything has to be explained by human nature, or by um, or by evolutionary reasons, and it's quite helpful and for different things, for knowing why people do certain things. And I think it does uh, these explanations almost completely disprove ideas like absurdism or nihilism. These ideologies that say, well, nothing really makes sense in the world, so what's the point anyway? But despite my feelings about that, I'm going to just try and be good anyway. Um, but this idea that everything has to be explained, or everything has to have a selfish reason behind it, has been very unhelpful. And I think that telling people that even though they're doing good things out of the kindness of their heart, that really it is a selfish part to it, and that it doesn't matter that you do something because, well, you're gaining some kind of prestige, or people are at least looking at you as though you're a good person, so you're getting that out of it. It's not helpful, because quite often when you do something out of the kindness of your heart, you're not thinking, well, people are going to look at me uh, like I'm some kind person because of this. It may be in the back of your head, it may be the reason why you're doing it, but it's not helpful if when you're about to do something good, you think, well, am I only doing this because people will look at me like I'm a good person? Because at the end of the day, you're then less likely to do that good thing. And I would much rather live in a society where people are doing good things than not doing anything at all. Even if people aren't doing bad things, if people are just keeping to themselves and doing nothing, then this is not a society that is going to flourish. And that is the society we're hurtling towards today. We need to put the magic back in life. Now, I don't believe in magic in the traditional sense, that you can have some magician who does these amazing tricks because he was gifted certain powers by the fairies, or whatever. But there is a lack of mystique in life, or at least a perceived lack of mystique. There are still many questions about life that are still unanswered, but people put forward answers as though they are the truth, or that they are, science has solved this question. But it's not, doesn't always feel very satisfying. Now, it could be because people are wanting a magic reason or a religious reason, or it could well be that science actually hasn't answered it, and that the idea that it has is quite misguided. As a Christian, I've had this conversation with lots of people who have said, well, science has answered all the questions in life, so what's the purpose of Christianity? And I say, well, it hasn't. It hasn't answered all the questions. Science hasn't answered why we're here, despite all the odds in the universe. The fact that we have people who can think about why the universe exists is so improbable that it would be almost impossible given how the world or how the universe works. But the fact that we are here kind of suggests that there's something a bit extra. Whether that's God or whether that's something else science hasn't answered or is yet to answer, it's not really, it's not up to me. It's not up to anyone. And to live life in that, based off of that hope that, well, maybe one day science will fix it, and so therefore I am a believer in the great and holy science. Now, I'm not going to go on a spiel about how science is the new religion, because it's a bit old and it's a bit tired, and I know a lot of people, including myself, kind of get annoyed with it. But it must be said that a lot of people who believe in, as a great philosopher once called it, scientism, don't actually know what they're talking about. They say, well, this professor of physics or this professor of biology says, well, this is how things are, and so I'm going to believe them. But do you yourself know that that is true? Now, you've got a lot of people who have looked at the research, the peers, who have looked at it and said, yes, this is true. And you've got a governing body who's looked at it and said, yes, this is true. But do you know what else also does that? Religion. In Christianity, Judaism, Islam, even in some Vedic traditions, you have a group of people, a group of peers who look at an idea and say, yes, that's true. That's what Jesus said. That's what Muhammad said. This is what some Jewish prophet said. And it makes sense for the whole theology of our religion. And so I say to you who are not scientists, especially if you're not a scientist in the sciences of cosmology or astrology, I can't remember what they call it now, the science of how things such as the universe or the world or how life came to be, and have not been looking at the research extensively, I say to you, drop this belief in scientism and start believing in something more realistic to your own life. You're not a particle in the universe. You are a living, breathing human with a consciousness. You are the most improbable thing in the whole realm of the universe and of science. So I'd say to you, you're a little bit more special than just stardust. You're a lot more special than mere chance, because we're not here by mere chance. If it was a 50-50 thing, like everything was completely random, but it was 50-50 whether or not you'd come into the world as a rock or come into the world as a human, then I could understand this kind of this cynical belief in scientism, which I would say is separate from actual science. But you're not. The probability is very small. I'm not sure what the actual numbers are, but it's something like 0.1% chance of there being humans. Now you could say, well, my parents had sex and therefore that means that I'm here. So the probability is very small. But still not really. The probability of there being a species on a world that's perfectly suited for them is very small, especially when you consider the size of the universe. Now, that doesn't mean that you're an accident, that humans are something that the universe has just farted out. There is something very purposeful about a being that can think the way we do, despite eating what we eat. We can communicate through what's essentially bits of sand and gold, uh, and shoot it from where I am here in Norfolk all across the world. It can even be seen in space, I'd imagine. How can an accident produce that? And you could say, well, it's just, we've been around for so long, but we haven't. We haven't been around for so long. We haven't, the the amount of time that humans have been as we are today has been very short when we look at what science tells us is the case. If evolution is such that it started however many million years ago or a billion years ago, whatever, the the natural progression would have been from us as hominids into just other hominids, not into this amazingly intelligent, amazingly complex being that's able to communicate the way that we do. It doesn't make sense for any of this to be mere accident or just the natural progression of life because nothing else has done this and nothing else has come close. People say, well, monkeys are using tools. Yeah, but so are crows. I'm pretty sure elephants use some form of tool to do certain things. Uh, all sorts of different animals use different things. Even like insects will use certain parts of a plant to do particular activities. What is a tool but something to a physical thing or even an idea to be able to complete some form of task. Now, there are types of birds who collect various different leaves and flowers and create a nice uh, piece of art to attract a mate. Now, you could say, well, that's not really a tool, but it is really. You're using a physical thing or an idea to uh, to be able to fix or create some form of result that you otherwise wouldn't be able to gain without said object or idea. We're not just using tools as humans, and even when we are, we're not even using them to get results. A phone is not merely a tool. A computer is not merely a tool. The radio is not merely a tool. It's something far beyond that. Yes, we are using something to gain a result, but often that result is not necessarily very clear. But at the end of the day, how did we get within 100 years from something that you could barely hear someone over, which had to be transmitted through a wire, by going through other people who had to put wires uh, in different holes, to then being able to on something about that small communicate with someone in America while you're in the middle of Mongolia, for instance. It doesn't make sense. Now you could say, well, it was just the natural progression after we found this thing or that thing, but still, it doesn't make sense for what is essentially a a slightly advanced monkey being able to communicate through bits of sand and metal from one side of the globe to the other, and even more so, being able to communicate from Earth into space and vice versa. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense that everything is by accident. So I hope that you can take some form of solace in that. That despite what cynics and um, atheists with 110 IQs say, we are not accidental. And even if you want to just bring it straight into, well, my parents purposefully had me, even if you're an accident, they still did something and you came into the world. What do they think would happen if they did what they did and you came out? You're here for a reason, and even if that reason is eludes you, Try and find a reason. Perhaps your reason in life is to help a certain type of person, or it's perhaps to create a certain type of art, or just do anything. But if you want to reach full meaning, you have to leave a legacy virtuously. And again, this doesn't conflict with religion, especially Christianity, because despite our life being so short and what happens in the next life being more important, or what we gain in the next life being important, because we are right beside God. This current life, our mortal life, is so important because it matters what we do. It matters that we trust Jesus and follow him, and it matters that we gain riches in heaven as a badge of honor, to say to us, yes, I was a good person. I did these things and God has rewarded me. And you don't reach that point if you do good things to get further in life. You don't reach heaven. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that you're saved by works, but it is true that God knows what our heart is like. And if we are only doing good things, or only abstaining from bad things out of some form of evil in our soul, then we're probably not actually trusting in Jesus, and we've probably not been moved by the Holy Spirit. The meaning of life has often been thought of as various different things by lots of different people, and their answers have always been terrible, and they've always been less than satisfactory. The Buddhists would say the meaning of life is to suffer, or at least that's what I was taught in RE. Whether that's what they actually believe or not, I don't know. But there are people who believe that, and it doesn't mean anything. Everyone suffers at some point, but it doesn't mean anything. There's no finality to it. Now, if you said the meaning of life is to suffer and overcome, that is closer to an actual purpose in life, or an actual commentary on what life is, or how life should be lived. Merely saying that it is to suffer is beyond stupid, because it does. That's not what life. Anyone, even an idiot, could know that's not what life is. When I've told people my theory about the meaning of life, and I've told religious people, they've said, well, surely the meaning of life is to glorify God. But my question is, why do you glorify God? If you get nothing out of it, if even after you glorify God, you're only going to go to hell, that's not really the meaning of life. And if it means that your life's going to be terrible and no one's going to remember you, well, there's no point in it. The reason why you glorify God is to be able to get to the next stage, is to have that legacy almost as a byproduct of your good virtue and of your religiosity. And within Christianity, obviously, your religiosity is what gives you virtue. But you glorify God by doing things with a virtuous heart, so that you can live on forever, or live on longer, whether that's through reputation or through heaven. So really, no matter how you spin it, and I may change my opinion on this in the future, I don't know, but it really seems as though the true meaning of life is to merely be remembered, even if that's only in the heavenly realm. But it's to live on somehow, whether that's through children, whether that's through your personal legacy, whether that's through deeds. Maybe you've built stuff that's helped people, like a house. Now, Now you think about all those men who built cathedrals, who today we look at and think, wow, that's a nice cathedral. I bet whoever built that was proud. And you may not know his name, but his mark is left. A lot of times with old buildings, you will have, a list of who built it, and you'll at least have the name of who designed it. But even so, their mark is still left, and their soul can look at that. If for whatever reason we are in a realm that ghosts exist, and his soul is still on Earth, he can look at that and say, "I did that." He can turn to his ghost friends and say, "I did that." But so many jobs nowadays, by the point that you die, all that's left is some little bit of archived data. And I feel for people who still do office jobs or will only ever do office jobs. That's why in your personal life, or even in your work life, but in your social life, which encompasses everything, family, friends, uh, your office job, you need to leave marks on people, positive marks, that is, so that you can be remembered in some way. They may not even remember your name, but they might remember your face or you as a person. They might remember the thing that you did. But it's far more important that you leave some kind of legacy, even if it's like breadcrumbs that you leave throughout your life, and the first one is already dissolved or eaten. There will still be breadcrumbs that people will find later on. So when you get old, do not simply retire into nothingness. If you have to leave a legacy at all, be it that you leave a legacy to your grandchildren, that they receive a good inheritance, whether that's money or whether that's upbringing or wisdom. But leave something so that in the future your grandparents can say, "Oh yes, I remember what my grandparent told me," or "I remember what my grandparent gave me," or "this thing that they did for me or left for me before they died has really helped me, and I'll be forever grateful for it." Rather than them thinking, "Oh well, it's sad they're gone, but oh well." That's not how you want your descendants to think of you. Um, so I hope any of that made sense. If I'm completely wrong, please let me know, but at least be polite about it. I think once you can realize what the goal in life is, even if you don't think it's the meaning, but the goal in life is to live as long as you can, even if that's just through your legacy, that it gives you some kind of comfort that you can just do things and it will be all right. And I literally mean that. Just do things, make things, leave some kind of mark, even if you just write on a wall somewhere, John was here or something. It's a lot better than leaving nothing or leaving a trail of rubbish or a trail of broken hearts or a trail of tears. This is a simple concept. And I think people have known this throughout history, that you have to breed in some way and you have to leave some form of legacy. Your reputation matters a lot more than I think a lot of people think it does. And I don't just mean, you know, virtue signaling, because people see right through that. Even people who virtue signal themselves, probably even more so, see through it. And I don't just mean virtue signaling in the very current sense. I mean literally just unmeaningfully telling people how good you are. It's the same as humble bragging. It was very similar to humble bragging. But yeah, leave a legacy, have children, your life will be fine. Even if you can't do those things yet, especially have children, it's very difficult for people to do at the moment in this country. But you can leave a legacy. It's very easy. Even just doing YouTube videos, is some form of legacy. But don't make that your only thing, because it is quite shallow and it's not particularly useful unless you're doing how-to videos or something. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. Stick around for my next ramblings, and goodbye.